EA, uh, EAL expertise. And the first thing that obviously I'm going to do, so I need to get my next slide. Just a moment. I just need to get back. I couldn't change my slide. I don't know why. Let's see if this is going to work. Excellent. So the first thing I think what Graham asked us to speak about is the benefits of doing the EAL quality mark, and what was really important and why this process was important for us as a school, because we allocated time and space to review our EAL policy, processes and practice against the set criteria. Progress of EAL students, especially levels A and B, is now owned by the rest of the school, and obviously the focus is on that adaptive teaching that seems it's a key word in teaching at the moment. And what I really liked is that we came together as a unit. So that sense of collegialism and, you know, working towards that shared goal. And then obviously from the onset, I wanted us to go for the highest possible award, which is the gold, and the intent was always to really give the best possible service to our students or provision. And in the end, we got the gold award. So how do I develop these curriculum leaders, EAL expertise? And I think when I was preparing for today, I think 4 things came to mind. The first thing is inform. The next thing is educate. The third thing is challenge. And the fourth thing is hold. So what do I mean by inform? All members of staff, and obviously including the subject leaders, they are all familiar with what EAL stands for. So defining EAL students, be looking at the definition by the Department of Education, and that's very much, it's promoted, it's communicated regularly. Then I produce detailed reports about students and their needs, and those reports include background information, what level of language, proficiency of English they have, actions that have been taken, that need to be taken, recommendations, and clear achievable targets. So when we have students that come from abroad and when I assess them, that is what everybody gets, including the subject leaders. Subject leaders are informed of students' progress and any developments. So the outcomes of the meetings with the parents, with any external agencies, or with any important information that is always shared. And I inform them about trainings, research, platforms, and everything that is current and relevant to our EAL cohort. They are informed about that. When we talk about educating the colleagues, I feel it's very, very important that, let's say, when we have, especially new arrivals, I educate them about that link, I can call it, or when a Chinese student, example, needs to learn English, or when a Ukrainian student needs to learn English, I talk about phonological, syntactical, semantic, phonetic, cultural variables that play part in that acquisition of L2. And of course, when I say L2, I mean English here. recently we have been, I can use the word blessed, because sometimes English will be L3, because now we have students where they come from homes where one parent speaks one language, the other parent speaks another one, and then English is their third language. I regularly deliver CPD and inset sessions that include strategies for learning, but I always, from the moment I took this job on, I looked beyond those strategies, and I'll be able to elaborate why I feel that that is important. So, for instance, when what I talk about, I talk quite a lot about, let's say, Halliday's systemic functional linguistics and Chomsky's universal grammar, and I view them as mutually dependent, not mutually exclusive. At the moment, I'm preparing some of the sessions on the bilingual brain and what Costa, the research that Costa did, and what it tells us about the science of language. And then many of my sessions are looking at the perspectives from, apologies, I don't know what's happened there, but perspectives from applied linguistics and cognitive psychology. How the staff is educated as well. There are strategies for supporting EAL students, and that is like posters, booklets, helpful links, etc. So, for instance, these are some of the things that are coming on your screen, which I would term as quite basic from my perspective. So, for instance, low-level students, it's level A, B, and C. It's important to plan for every lesson vocabulary that they want them to learn, strategies, activities for language development, subject contact, and then a social aspect relevant to students' needs. And that, of course, involves thinking about group work, seating plans, discussions, exposure to good levels of standard English, etc. Here we've got some of the examples when I do CPD sessions. You can see here, for instance, some of the psycholinguistics models of language production by Hitoshi Muranoi, and you can read here what else I educate my colleagues about, because I go from the perspective we are all educated people, and we need a challenge, and we need to learn constantly and develop as we educate our students. Here are some of the strategies you're probably familiar about. So these are just strategies for supporting EAL students on the left-hand side. And you can see, for instance, strategies are split into whether the student is a beginner or intermediate or advanced. I use the Bell Foundation framework at the moment because I think that it's so detailed, and they're doing some fabulous work in the field of EAL. And every time I deliver a CPD session, I do remind my colleagues about I call it Hippocratic Oath, which is that teaching standard 5, where we adapt teaching to respond to the strengths and needs of all pupils. And of course, EAL falls into that standard. I do challenge as well, maybe because I love to be challenged, and I think that as educators we need to be challenged. So I remind my colleagues of the myths associated with EAL. I show them case studies and tell them this is what we can do. And I am very much an advocate for EAL learners, and I always fight their corner. So when we look at what myths I refer to, this is very much linked to that work so universal grammar will very much speak about that, but some of the myths are that EAL learners can't learn in school until they learn English. EAL learners do better in school than their monolingual English-speaking peers, and EAL learners learn English naturally from their friends, so they don't need teachers' help. So these are some of the myths that are associated with EAL learners. What you've got in front of you, this is a student that came to me in year 10. He is now in year 12. When the child came from Hong Kong, the first assessment that I gave him, he got grade 3. And then a 3+. He's a hardworking student. I share with my colleagues what type of errors he has in this written piece of writing. And obviously that is something as well where if the colleagues are not from, they don't have language background, they certainly are learning, you know, some of the terminology, and they can recognize it in their own area. But so this is what this student got in January 2023. And what I wanted to say to students, my colleagues, I know that this, obviously he was in year 10. I knew that in year 11, he's gonna have to do his GCSEs, but I wanted to say to my colleagues, there is a lot that can be done here if we focus on the right approach. And this student got grade 8 in English language, and he was 1 mark off grade 8 in literature. Okay. And then the last aspect of what I do is very much what I call holding. And what I mean by this term, holding my colleagues, I need to understand that for them, this area can be really overwhelming. And, you know, sometimes if you have a student who is sitting in your classroom and they are not saying anything, and, you know, the teachers are trying and doing their best, but sometimes that can be quite overwhelming. So I very much hold that space and listen to my colleagues, and I don't judge them. I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, I try to balance that holding and understanding them with the needs that our EAL students have. And I think this poster that's been issued by the Bell Foundation, where we have these 5 principles to guide EAL pedagogy, summarizes all the needs that our EAL students have. So I constantly am balancing that, you know, what my colleagues are experiencing and thinking and feeling to what the needs are of our EAL students. So that is really what I wanted to share with you. And I think I am just maybe 1 or 2 minutes over, but have you got any questions?
Can I suggest that if people have got questions, they put them in the chat?
Okay.
And we'll make sure that they get answered, because I know you've got to go fairly soon, Violetta, because you've got a parents' evening.
Yes, yeah, I'll go at 16:44.
Yeah. Okay, so please stay until then.
Yeah.
But if we put questions in the chat, then I think we get more of them. We might have time to discuss some at the end, might not, but we also make sure that everybody's question gets answered that way, which it doesn't if we're taking people. So
am I allowed to ask a question? Can I ask a question?
you can ask one question.
So it sounds really good, everything that you're doing to me sounds really, really good. And I just wondered about like what you said at the end about holding space and EAL being overwhelming for colleagues. How have you found that? Because this is something that it's like when you have like a linguistic background, then it seems kind of just obvious to you, doesn't it, in some ways? But then we, like, most people don't have that, and I think that, you know, some people, like, they kind of take naturally to, you know, language, and then but most people I think don't. And then so I don't know, I was just wondering how you deal with that, like aside from holding space, which I think is a really good way of talking about it. But like apart from that, like how do you find that they like the technical like linguistic information that you're giving them, do they kind of just are they learning it easily, or is it like just a slow process?
I think what's really important here, Andy, it's the trust. I think that obviously, you know, they are experts in their own field. And I think that they trust when I share this with them. Obviously, you know, I share the research. There is that trust that develops. And then they are not embarrassed to come and say, you know, this is really difficult. And I'll always simplify it for them. But I never want to simplify it to an extent that if the child only does that activity in the lesson, that they shouldn't be stretched and challenged. Do you see what I mean? And that's why, you know, and also, I don't know how much you know, but in England, we had this influx from Ukraine over the last 2 years, and we have had children who have had huge trauma. And then, you know, I needed to hold that space initially. They are not gonna respond. They will not, you know, perform in the lessons, but we needed to allow them that space. So I would talk to them about it. I would talk about as well their families and, you know, reassure them constantly. And then as soon as there is a progress from the child, I always share that to encourage my colleagues.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Violetta. So we'll send you the questions. Well, you may see some of them in the chat later on. But very conveniently, Andy's already on screen because he's our next speaker. Andy's from Rugby School in Thailand. They haven't done the EAL quality mark yet, but they have done something else, which I thought was so good, it needed to be shared. If you want to teach Andy's school, you have to do a 15-hour course written by Andy in EAL. It's an online course. And just its existence means that you know it's a school that takes EAL very seriously. So I'm going to hand over to Andy, who's going to tell us why and how.
Thank you. I'll just see if the screen sharing works. Okay. Is this?
Yeah.
Is this working? Yeah. Is that working now? Okay, so thanks everyone. So yes, I'm joining you from Thailand, and it's past my bedtime, but it's half term tomorrow, so it's all good. So I'm, as Graham said, I haven't done the EAL quality mark, but I've kind of worked with the EAL Academy over the last like year and a half, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. We made we collaborated to make an online course, a 15-hour course, which is the kind of introduction to teaching multilingual students, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. This is what I'm going to talk about. Like, why did I do it? What did I have to do for it to become a reality? I'll give you a little bit of a taster. I'll show you around for a few minutes of the course, and then I'll tell you kind of the upshot and the next steps for that. So I arrived at this school almost 3 years ago. It's getting on for 3 years now. It was a very different place when I arrived. It was actually my first international school, and I wasn't really prepared for it because I'd been in London for the previous like 11 years. And I was kind of in shock in a way because I heard, I remember the first week I heard a Korean boy talking in Korean to another Korean about a book in the library. And I heard the librarian say, "English only, please." And the Korean kind of just deflated and went, "Oh," like that. And I thought, this is, I wasn't expecting an English only policy. And I think that it's difficult for international schools because they're kind of like the parents expect a kind of English environment. So I think that the context is slightly different from UK context, but I think that the principles of the course and the principles of what we're doing are pretty much exactly the same. So this was a new school, and so they were building their EAL capacity. And the student profile of the school was pretty much international. So you can see here what our student profile is now. So you can see that we're about 40% Thai. So in a class of 30, that means 12 students are Thai. And you can see that we're only, in a class of 30, we probably only have about 4 or 5 English speakers, like native English speakers. So the graph here, or the graphic here, is not language data. It's just nationality data, and there are some bilingual families, but you can kind of extrapolate from this that most of our students speak English as an additional language, in the sense that they don't speak English at home; they speak another language at home. And so we came from a point where 3 years ago we were 80% EAL, but we were an English-only school. And so one of the things that happened in between to kind of spur this on is that we had an inspection. Oops, that's what's happened there. So we had an inspection by EDT, which is kind of like our Ofsted, and they gave us 3 recommendations, and 2 of them were about EAL. So the first one was about teachers having the knowledge to cater their lessons to EAL students, and so one of them was about training staff, and then the second one was about teachers actually using that knowledge in class. So this was a kind of wake-up call, I think, for the school, and then the principal, we met, and we kind of put a plan into action. That was the first thing that happened. That was the spur, and then the other thing was that we started getting more and more graduation data, and what the data was showing was that the Thai students, like almost half of them, wanted to actually stay in Thailand. They didn't want to go to American or Australian or UK universities and study in English. They wanted to actually study in Thai, or sometimes they wanted to like just work in Thailand. And so what was happening to their Thai as they were in an English-speaking school, we weren't kind of catering to it. We were at best maintaining their Thai at the level it was when they came to us, but we weren't helping them to actually get their Thai to a point where they could be academic or professional with it. And so what we wanted to do was A, meet the EDT criteria, and B, like do the best that we want best for our students, which is to make them bilingual, essentially. And so I've recently taken on this whole school role, which is like a head of language strategy role. And this is the language strategy that I've developed in very, very basic terms. So the first thing that I want to do is to get all of our students proficient in academic English and in social English, which is more difficult in our context than in the UK context, because they don't hear it like all of the time or as much. And the second big thing that I want to do is to keep them, or to get them, or to maintain their proficiency and to develop their proficiency in their home language. The third thing is kind of it would be nice to have another language as well, but like the first 2 are really the big 2 prongs of the language strategy. So after the EDT visit, the principal asked me to look online and find a training course for teachers. That was what we had to do, and so I really looked. I really did, and I was considering CELTA courses, and I was considering other things. Like I looked at the EAL Academy, which has some really good courses specifically for like specific subjects, especially science. I think that these are really great, but there was nothing really introductory for teachers. I think the EAL Academy had some really good ones for EAL coordinators as well, but what we wanted was something for all staff that was kind of an introduction, and so it wasn't really clear what I could choose, and so I had met Graham, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago now, at some event in London when I was working there, and so I thought about the EAL Academy, and so we got in touch, and we said, shall we make a course together, and that's how it happened. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through the course a little bit, in a very broad strokes. So it's billed as a 15-hour course, but actually there's quite a lot of information. If you wanted to spend 30 hours, you probably could. But 15 hours is doable as well. So there are 4 modules. The first one is a kind of reframing module. So it's called Multilingual Learners. And what I really wanted to do was to reframe EAL learners, not as, move away from like the deficit model of, they don't speak English, and move towards, they are multilingual people. And actually, we want them to be multilingual because that's what they need to be for their future. And this is what we need to do as a kind of international school. So I'll just click on that and show you a couple of things that are inside it. So here is my graphic of a language journey of an EAL pupil. I don't know if you can see it. So you can see that there are some triangles. This is how much English they know, and then there's the kind of the arrow pointing to how much English is showing when on arrival, which is not very much. But actually, if you look deeper, then you can see that they actually know quite a lot more English than they're able to produce at the beginning. And also, which is the key, is that this English is connected to this whole other resource, which is their home language. And what we want teachers to know about is to have that green triangle in mind, and to think of them as having all of that resource, and how to exploit that resource in the classrooms. So then we look at the language journey when English kind of grows, and then we talk about subtractive bilingualism and how we don't want them to lose their language. So I think that just the fact of seeing this was kind of an eye-opener for teachers, and they started to think of the students that because they can clearly see that we're not in an English-speaking environment, and so they started to see the students differently and as a more kind of whole person and asset-based linguistically. So then we talked about how long it takes to learn English, and then a couple of other things we talk about is the silent period. And then you can see like a little bit about how language is connected to culture and what that might mean, and how to respect the culture that the language comes from. And then we look at translanguaging as a kind of introduction to, as a kind of new concept, just as an introduction to translanguaging and how to use, like not specific strategies, but just what it is. So that's kind of the first module. So that's the reframing and the kind of trying to like become inspired by the possibilities of teaching multilingual students. And then I won't show you too much else, but but the second module is it really is kind of the meaty one. It's kind of a language training module, and it looks at it starts from the beginning. It starts from like phonics, and it looks at how like teaching phonics is different for multilingual students, in the sense that they need to know the words that the letters are connected to. So you can't learn the word cat unless you know what a cat is. And so just the process of learning to read is exactly the same for EAL students. It's just that they need to know the words that you're teaching them to read, rather than just teaching them to to learn a word that has no meaning for them. That's kind of making it very difficult to learn to read, pointlessly difficult. So we start from there, and then we kind of move up to, for the secondary school and the senior school, towards like some features of academic language and functional language and tier 1, 2, and 3 vocabulary. So that's in that. And then the last 2 modules, so the way that I've structured it, there are so many different ways you could structure it, but the way that I've chosen is to look at like input and output. And what I mean by that is like input is like everything that how do the students build their new knowledge? What's coming in? Like, are they like the teacher is talking to them, or they're reading something, or they're watching something? So that's kind of all input. And then so how do we make sure that that's comprehensible for them? So we kind of scaffold the input in English, and we can use translanguaging, and that kind of digs down a little bit deeper into like how you might do that, give some examples. And then the same process for output. So we look at the different types of texts that they might come across, and that they would be expected to produce. So what would they be expected to say, and what would they be expected to write, or something visual that they might be able to, might have to produce, like an infographic or a diagram or presentation. So looking at output as text, and then looking at different ways of scaffolding the output, which is basically the same thing as, or like kind of the mirror image of the input, which is helping them to verbalize their thinking using translanguaging, using linguistic scaffolds. So that's basically the structure of the course. It's quite meaty, but you can kind of learn as much as you want from it. Like some people who are very, very new to EAL, like they will be learning, just the basic stuff. That will stick, and that's fine. And then some people are more familiar with EAL, and then there's some stuff for them to kind of learn something new as well. So how has it gone? So we launched the first course in September 2023 with the 15 new teachers that were arriving. Like we were fortunate because the school has funded the course basically for new staff. So it was conceived of as a course for new staff. So we don't have to worry about funding for the new people coming in. So everyone coming in has to do that course, and usually we hire them a few months before they arrive. So they have that time before they arrive to kind of see what the mix is of our students, and then to kind of get that reframing, and then a few strategies for how to deal with them. We actually opened it up in March 24 to current teachers and TAs, and we managed to get 9, but it wasn't funded, so it wasn't like such a huge turnout. But then in July 24, we had 23 new teachers that year, or this year rather, and they've all undergone the course. And so now we have a total of 47 staff, which is about a quarter of our staff body. So that's kind of really good going within like a year and a half. So I think that within like another year or two, then we might be able to get up to like, around half. If we can get up to around half of the staff that have undergone this course, then I think that would be quite nice. And the good thing about this course is that sometimes like EAL, CPD, or INSET, like when staff leave, then the capacity of the school kind of diminishes. Whereas with this model, when staff leave, then new people are coming in, and they're actually the ones getting this course. And so in some ways, when current staff leave, then we're actually increasing our capacity because we have the funding for new staff. So of course, this didn't happen in a vacuum. Then we did lots of other things for like whole staff, CPD and INSETs, and also I've done a few workshops with heads of departments, and then they've kind of gone off and tried to develop their EAL capacity within their departments in their own way. We also had EAL focus for observations from the SLT and the SMT, and also and so we were forced to have EAL on the agenda for every single meeting last year, which was a really nice way of keeping EAL front and center for everyone. And so I would say that the upshot of that is that so far so good. Like there has really been a shift in culture. You would never have anyone saying this is an English only school anymore. Absolutely. And also like there hasn't been anyone who hasn't been kind of touched or engaged with this this kind of shift. And then we just had EDT visiting last week, and these are the comments that they made. So I'm really, really proud of everyone, because they have really taken this on and are committed to including all of our students in their lessons, and it's been a great success. And I think that the EAL Academy course has definitely been one of the major parts of this success. And obviously, like, my context is different to a UK context. I think that, you know, in the UK, the students get much more extensive exposure to English. and so that would kind of affect what you have to do. Your schools probably have a lower turnover than more like, you know, transitory international school environments, I guess. And then also the schools in the UK, they're less likely to go back to their home country for study or work, but some of them might do, but it's kind of less likely, whereas for us, it's kind of just a reality. But I think that and of course you have, as Violetta was saying, you know, refugees and lots of trauma attached to that as well. Which makes for very different priorities at the beginning. But I think that like I can see that I mean, it's the first time I've been in a school like this, so I can see the differences. But I think that what the similarities are that that the drivers for creating a multilingual environment, for celebrating heritage languages and celebrating multilingual identities and having that bilingual outcome, I think is the common factor in all of this. And I think that is pretty much what all of us probably want. And so that's me. And so I'd be happy to take any questions. It's kind of late for me, so I don't know if Graham, if it's all right.
Can we give you one question then, or you go? Because there is one in the chat.
I'm very happy to answer questions now, but maybe if it's in the chat and maybe in half an hour.
Well, should we just do this one because this is a quick one to answer, and there'll be others, I'm sure, in the chat. Course sounds great. This is from Julia. Did it take a long time to create?
Well, yeah, I think it did, because it really forced me to kind of organize what I knew into just a logical order, and then that kind of took a few hours. That probably took, I would say, about 20 hours, and then I think, and then you have to kind of think about how to present it in a way that is, you know, manageable and digestible and logical. I think probably it took me about 100 hours to make, which is a big ask, but it was kind of a labor of love. So I kind of was enjoying it, and then the outcome of that is that it really made me really super clear about about the strategies and what I wanted to achieve and how to achieve it. So it was definitely worth it, but it wasn't quick and easy.
Yeah, I think very good really is quick and easy, and I think it is a very, very good course. So, okay, so if you want a course like that for your school, get in touch with me and I'll explain how it can be done. It may take a lot of your time, but it's a lot cheaper than sending lots of people on courses individually, and it is bespoke. It matches your school's need because you design it. And I think it's a really good model of CPD. So thanks so much, Andy. If I can now hand over to Zoe from Wellington School in Trafford. And just for Zoe to start to say, I mean, when I did my visit there, what really struck me for the EAL quality mark was in every classroom I went to, every teacher knew what they were doing about EAL. And that's quite special. So, Zoe, tell us how you've done it.
I will indeed. Bizarrely, when I share my screen, I can't see it on our platform, but I can only see my PowerPoint. So can you still hear me?
I can hear you and I can see your screen.
That is perfect. That's okay. I was slightly worried. I can't see any of you.
I can see you as well. I don't know why it's not showing us everybody for some reason.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
Right. Super stuff. I'll just click current slide. Yeah, I'm probably coming at this tonight from a very different angle. 2022, we basically inherited a very large Hong Kong cohort for our school. Our percentages for EAL were very, very low beforehand. Even our current year 11 and year 10 are around 8%. And probably as a school, we were, I don't know, EAL was not necessarily a massive priority to us. Any pupils that we had been in the country since birth or for a long time. Their English was relatively proficient. So what we found was that actually, knowing that we had a large Hong Kong population, in addition, refugees from the Ukraine, that we needed to actually sort of really think about this. And as SLT, and I'm an assistant head myself, I was put in a position of leading this for the school. So just give us a bit of context for our school, 1,500 pupils, 11 to 18. I'm in Trafford, so it is a selective area, but we're a non-selective school. So there's plenty of grammar schools nearby, but we are a very successful non-selective school in Trafford. Our current profile is about 15% EAL, predominantly Hong Kong pupils, but a number who have EAL needs. The difference that we have is our year 7, 8 and 9 at the moment have a profile of about 25% EAL, and this has changed from say 7 to 8% in previous years. So while we have small numbers of pupils that have been band A and B on sort of the DFE proficiency scale, many of our pupils are quite eloquent generally, but particularly a couple of years ago, back in sort of 2022, we did have a number who had just started the school and had been in the country for a very limited period of time. So basically, after maybe a little bit of reflection and worrying about what on earth did I know about EAL teaching and how on earth I was going to lead it in the school, we started to put certain plans in place. So I'm hoping kind of my talk today will be about maybe people are finding themselves in kind of new situations or perhaps quite new to the role and what works effectively. So first of all, lots of research, as well as obviously through the EAL Academy. We delved into every single piece of reading we could do. I mean, we've mentioned before, Violetta was mentioning before, the Bell Foundation. We have a subscription to the National College from our school. Every EAL book and subscription was signed up for. And we learned as much as we could about the proficiency scale, just to get an idea of what works. I was really fortunate as well, and to visit a number of schools. The Bolton Esther Academy was particularly insightful. They sort of have the reverse almost of our EAL cohort. So I went there and learned so much. And what was really validated is a lot of the things we started to put in place. They said were really great practice. We've trialed certain platforms for some of our needier pupils. We've tried Learning Village. We probably don't have a large enough size cohort of EAL pupils to sort of make that work. So we've just recently switched to Flash Academy. So it's a bit more kind of online. We can select topics for them to study at home, but at the same time they can almost use the platform a little bit like Duolingo perhaps, you know, to build up their language. So basically we deep dived into every piece of EAL research that was out there. What I wanted to get straight very quickly was how we communicated with families, and also how we made sure that we knew what we needed to do about what we need to know about our pupils. So we invested in EAL Star, which basically uses a proficiency scale to assess pupils. And we've identified probably each year maybe a group of about 7 or 8 pupils that do have need a C or below in terms of their competency with English. Likewise, we made use of the data that we already have, such as reading age data, spelling age data, and we triangulated that to make sure we could offer staff all the information that they needed. We use a platform called Class Charts for our just general kind of referral logins. So we introduced on there an EAL concern and information button, just for staff to be able to flag up anything that might be problematic. And likewise, any feedback we could give from the team, we use like the round robin function to share that information with staff. We focused a lot because, to be honest, I'll be really honest, probably if you went back 5 or 6 years ago at our school, the distinction perhaps between SEND and EAL wouldn't have been clear to a number of staff. I'll be really, really honest about that. And I can include myself in that. But what we've done an awful lot of work on is identifying EAL need, and where that can be perhaps omitted, it's helped us an awful lot in terms of determining SEND needs that might be veiled by EAL needs for pupils. So one of the first plans was to put interventions in place for pupils that require it. So all pupils that have any area that's C or below on the proficiency scale do get additional time-scaled interventions. We're big believers in pupils being in the classroom around English speakers, ultimately to be in an immersive atmosphere, an environment for their learning, but there are times where that is needed. We also make sure with our staffing that any pupils with a reading age below 12 receive some sort of intervention. That might be guided reading for those in greater need. EAL irrelevant, to be honest. We'll get support for phonics, reading and comprehension as well. So we keep these timescaled, we regularly reassess and make sure that pupils are classroom ready as soon as possible. And that's been one of our biggest kind of drives going forward. There's an awful lot of consideration as well for physical resources. We put information out now to new starters especially, and learn a lot about resources they might have had at primary school. So physical resources like bilingual dictionaries, likewise some pupils very au fait with using iPads in lessons. Like I say, we've got kind of subscriptions to things like Flash Academy. Not so much now, but perhaps previously when a number of people started who were relatively new to schooling in Britain, we made one or two timetable adjustments. Maybe we did, you know, for some pupils it was a little bit better to not attend MFL lessons early on and focus more on English. Likewise, in particular when then we were using the Learning Village platform, maybe to make some homework adjustments to give pupils time to do that. We're finding that less and less now because the cohort of pupils we're having coming through have typically been in England, you know, longer and are much more advanced in their English practice. But there are still needs for certain pupils. The big thing for me was pedagogy. One of my other responsibilities is teaching and learning for the school and staff development. And as somebody that's been at the school, I'm now in my 20th year there, and we have very, very strong staff retention. There are, you know, I'm by no means the longest serving member of staff. We've got a lot of staff that have been there a long time, absolutely brilliant staff. And I was very, very conscious of this feeling like it was something additional, something extra that had to be done in planning a lesson, and used a lot of kind of my teaching and learning platform to reinforce that actually what makes a big difference for EAL pupils, a bit like with SEND and PP, is actually good quality first inclusive teaching, because those things in particular benefit pupils who might have an additional need that's in place. We drafted a policy and very quickly kind of put together a toolkit, which we shared through a CPD program. And that runs right the way through from supporting ECTs right up to SLT, because it was something, you know, a big change we've had to embrace as a school, and something that we've massively enjoyed doing. What was interesting, I mean, we did masses of research, read everything going. But at the same time, it's interesting conversations that came up from having conversations with staff. So seating plans, for example, we kind of went down the route of pairing up EAL pupils with, you know, very confident English speakers. And that has its benefits, of course it does. But at the same time, because we had such a large cohort of Hong Kong pupils, actually seating them together, and we found that pupils were naturally helping and supporting each other. Perhaps when discussing ideas, that's where we kind of really learn to embrace the bilingualism of pupils. because they were developing wonderful ideas, but still feeding back in English, writing in English, and actually really factoring that in. And a lot of that came from insights from staff, observations of lessons, and learning what worked for pupils. I would say through our sort of quality assurance policies, whatever we're focusing on a wider level for teaching and learning at the school, we make sure that we always pay particular attention to checking in and supporting our SEND, EAL, PP pupils. We make sure that's a point, a bit like Nick and Violetta were saying before, regular CPD is important, whether it's through staff meetings, CPD meetings, our teaching and learning newsletter. We keep EAL at the forefront. Sort of in early days, especially, we did a lot of championing of kind of wins staff are really proud of. I kind of really voiced to staff, you might not see this overnight, you won't see it overnight, but give it a few weeks. Let's just see where that pupil's got to. A pupil of my own, a Ukrainian refugee, started at the end of year 10, missed a whole year of GCSE, was writing in bullet points. But 6 months down the line, writing beautifully, and by the end of the course, was achieving band 6s. And sharing that practice was really buoyant for staff, because, like I say, it was kind of something new for a lot of staff at our school, and maybe something to fear a little bit, perhaps in some way. But it was embraced, and that, again, testament to our staff body for doing that. We have a full toolkit for staff and pastoral leads. This is just one of the visuals I use to go alongside it, just to summarise the things that make a difference. And again, I overlap that with quality first teaching. Staff, the reality of teaching in the modern day is numerous additional things to do. Is not always going to work. It's got to be, a reinforcement of actually what's really good practice works with a number of students. Yes, we have in here certain things that might work. We accept things like translation technology, such as Google Translate, is not perfect. We all know that, but it's a start. We know to only use short pieces of information for that. But we make sure as well that when we set homework, any sort of worksheets and things are saved electronically as well. So at home, families can utilise that together. But what we found is these are the things that kind of massively work for our school. What's so important, again, I mentioned before about an English immersive environment, is the pastoral and extracurricular side of things. So much of a pupil's day is about that. And again, our toolkit details massively what pastoral staff should do when new pupils start. Obviously, you've got kind of, a mass induction, maybe at the start of a school year, but during the school year as well. You might get the odd pupil that starts, and we've put in kind of a system, and we've had pupils create kind of PowerPoints and welcoming kits and things to basically support pupils in starting. I mean, I jumped further down to a later bullet point there, but we've used the Young Interpreters Scheme, and we've had so many pupils sign up to that to support pupils as buddies. I have an executive committee that runs whole school systems. They've made welcome videos. We have magazines. Literally, I've got so many involved. I don't know what to do with them, to be honest. But it's been absolutely fantastic. I mean, other things we've had to consider as well is like, I always review things like parents' evening numbers. Are there any potential EAL barriers for parents getting involved? Our school has just reintroduced pupil review day with tutors, which means parents will come in face to face again, because we have been using kind of online facilities, and we can offer kind of support there. And indeed, our intervention coordinator is going to be available on that day as well, to support and discuss kind of progress with the relevant people. We use lots of people voice and their kind of thoughts on things. you know, to really kind of inform the practice. And we do really feel like our EAL cohort is well integrated into the school. I mean, likewise for parents, things like we have a home communications log, and we send out a link if parents would rather communications, you know, translated or in email format, you know, to support if they would rather phone calls, you know, just to make things as accessible as possible. I mean, now we're in 2024. One of the things we now have to consider, which we've never offered before, and say we've got easily sort of 30 plus Hong Kong pupils in each of our year 7, 8 and 9 year groups. In the past, probably things like first language qualifications were a little bit ad hoc. You know, we'd get the odd request, and we've always supported those, but we've had to put a system in place because the reality is going into next academic year, we technically have a GCSE Cantonese cohort as well. So having to think ahead as well is important too. But what I'd say overall is, I think in a context like mine, where perhaps this has been a big change, we're not talking a massive cohort of students, perhaps in comparison to many other schools. All I could say is if you're maybe sort of taking on a role similar to mine, which feels very different, is just be as research led as possible. Read up on things, use the Bell Foundation, read anything the EAL Quality Mark's got to offer. I mean, Alex mentioned the course before. I'm certainly going to be recommending that to a number of my staff tomorrow morning, I'm telling you now. But get things in place. You know, obviously I had my role as, you know, EAL lead as part of senior leadership, but I've got 2 amazing intervention coordinators who pretty much do my job for me, I'll admit, but they, you know, look after, and we've got enough people in place to cover our need. I mean, that's the key, you know, argue for that. If you need enough people, I know it's tricky in schools nowadays, but make sure you've got enough people in place, get policies in place. You know, we're really fortunate as well, a wonderful team of governors, you know, where we can feed back on what we're doing. I'm thinking ahead as well, like I say, with things like examinations, you know, these things come around quicker than you imagine. From a day-to-day perspective, you know, have those conversations with staff, be available, offer drop-ins, offer easy things like like an EAL information button and whatever system you've got at school. You know, I've had some really, really lovely kind of niche conversations. I remember a staff worried that her accent might be confused, like quite a broad accent, might be quite confusing for some pupils. And there's something where, well, I'm an honorary Northerner now, but back in the day, I did have a much stronger Southern accent. I used to worry about kind of, you know, dropping H's and vowel sounds of things like phonics. And these are really, really legitimate conversations to have. And likewise, there'll be times where staff might come to me and I'll go, do you know what? I don't know the answer myself, but I'm going to find out for you, or I know where I can go to find out. So I'm hoping this might have given, you know, a series of pragmatic tips if you're kind of new to the job. And we were so privileged to sign up for the EAL Quality Mark this year, and we were absolutely made up with getting the gold award. We dedicated an awful lot of time to you know, making the school successful, like we do in many things. And you know, we really, really embrace the EAL community that we have. So feel free to add any questions to the chat. It'll be a privilege to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. I certainly felt inspired when I came to visit you. And if there's anybody who works anywhere near Trafford, I'm sure you'd be keen to show them what you do, wouldn't you? Likewise, if anybody lives near Wokingham, go and see Violetta. I suspect somehow most of your schools wouldn't offer to pay for you to go and see Andy in Thailand, however. So it would be very good. You'd learn a lot. I'm kind of hoping
I was just thinking that. I was going to offer that to my head teacher tomorrow.
I have talked to him about doing the EAL Quality Mark there, but he's yet to convince his head that they need to fly me out. So just to wrap up, then, thank you everybody for coming. There are many more people will see this online. We've got quite a lot registered just so that we could tell them when it goes online. It's always good to hear about what's happening in schools. I've seen these things because I've been there, but to share it with lots of other people is a real privilege. And it's part of why I do the job. None of us can do this on our own. And we have to share all the good things we do. So thanks very much. Hope to see you all at the next one, which will be in March or maybe in May. I haven't quite decided yet. And depends on some of the upcoming EAL quality marks. So goodbye, and hope to see you all soon.